What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and I believe in life, everybody deserves a second chance, and I think that applies to fantasy football as well. So today, we're going to talk through 5 bounce-back players to target in 2024. These are guys who burned you last year, are probably on your do-not-draft list, but I want you guys to give them a second chance and think about drafting them in 2024 fantasy football. So with all that being said, if you enjoy, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like, let's go.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, ice around my body like I'm frozen. She gon' let me.
Now, our first bounce back player in this video is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Now, I will say this is usually like an underdog graphic, but I wanted to show this for the sake of how bad did these players burn you last year? And we're going to use underdog playoff advance rates. Now, of course, if you're new to underdog, they have a ton of fantasy football drafts. So you can go out there, get ready for your home leagues, see where the sharp players with real money on the line are drafting these players, and you can go into your home league and absolutely dominate. So make sure you check that out. We draft every single Monday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time on Underdog. Use promo code RON, and they'll match your first deposit up to $250, and you'll get a bonus pick'em option in the pick'em lobby for your guys' enjoyment. Now, with Jonathan Taylor, we can see the average expected advance rate for a Best Ball Mania team on Underdog is 2 divided by 12. Every 2 teams in a 12-person league advance to the playoffs. That is a 16.7% rate. If you go over that, that means that your team was good and this player really helped you advance through the playoffs. If it's below 16.7%, this is a player that hurt you. Jonathan Taylor had a 10.9% playoff advancement rate. That is really bad. He really hurt your team if you drafted him, and he's now going in the second round as the RB5 this year, and I'm drafting a lot of him. Now, when we talk about what happened and what went wrong last year, the question is, where can you even start? It was a shit show from the get-go. We had this weird contract dispute between him and Jim Irsay. I think he went on an RV and had to sort of talk through his contract. They don't give it to him. He has ankle soreness. They put him on the pup, and he falls down draft boards. If you guys remember my home league, we filmed the draft party. I drafted him in the second round before all of this came out. He gets put on the pup, and I pretty much burn a second round pick. I imagine a lot of people out there probably did the same, and then he never really got up to speed, where he comes in with the ankle pain discomfort and the ankle soreness, and then right as he's getting going, he tears his thumb ligament, where if we look at his game logs, he's ramping up. Of these 10 games he played last year, only 7 of them he played over 50% of the snaps. He was splitting a lot of time with Zach Moss. In that Week 7 game versus Cleveland, he hits 20 points, and then he gets a 17 against Carolina. Does okay against New England. Bye week, comes out 20-plus points against a Tampa Bay defense that's really good in terms of run stopping. And then tears his thumb ligament. And then he comes back. And then he gives you 17 points versus Las Vegas, 27 versus Houston. Probably too little too late, but that last game is really encouraging, where that looked like vintage Jonathan Taylor. Now, I will say he was RB12 in points per game on the entire season, despite all of those hiccups, which is pretty impressive. But that final game is a peek into what we draft Jonathan Taylor for. 30 carries, 188 yards, a touchdown. And when it comes to injury, in terms of is he going to bounce back, is the thumb ligament okay? It seems like it is. This is Jeff Mueller from over at 4for4. He is their injury analyst, and he pretty much says you could talk about the movement efficiency and power differences that you see from weeks 5 through 10 with Jonathan Taylor versus weeks 17 and 18, and he said that there is a big difference, if you will. I don't know why I was struggling to find that word, but you guys get what I'm saying. He looked a lot better in terms of his speed, his movement. The thumb ligament seems like it's going to be behind him in 2024, and he says you can draft him. He is his RB4 in 2024. Now, this isn't a guy who's coming off an Achilles injury or an ACL injury, just a torn thumb ligament. He had some ankle issues before the season. These are bumps and bruises. We've seen it with Christian McCaffrey in the past, where you get 2 unlucky seasons and then it's behind you. A lot of times in the NFL, injury proneness is kind of a give and take. It's kind of just a flow of how things go. Some players get unlucky, some then get lucky there after that. And I think that that's what we're going to see with Jonathan Taylor, where if we just go back to 2021, we can see what upside we're chasing with Jonathan Taylor. This is a guy who's 25. He's not washed. He's not all that far removed from this 2021 season where he was the RB1 in points per game. He has that 20-plus point per game ceiling because we've already seen it already. And that was with just 40 catches, which that's one of the biggest concerns with him and Anthony Richardson in this offense. Richardson's not going to check it down. He's going to scramble a ton, and that's okay. I think Jonathan Taylor can flirt with like 40-plus receptions, and that's fine. He's not someone that needs 70-plus to hit his ceiling. He's someone that can hit that on efficiency, right? He had 5.5 yards per carry on 332 rush attempts and 20 touchdowns. Now, 20 is a little bit ambitious, but 40-plus catches and like 15 total touchdowns is like his absolute ceiling. Isn't all that crazy. I know that people are very concerned about Anthony Richardson taking away those goal line carries and those red zone opportunities, but at the end of the day, we simply want good players on good teams, and that's what Jonathan Taylor is. This is an offense that I want pieces of. We know Shane Steichen is a really good play caller. You can see here on the left, this chart is from Hayden Winks. Hayden has great stuff over at Underdog. And in terms of projected points per game, that's from Vegas, and then you have projected plays per game from Mike Clay. So you get pace and scoring, and the culture in that top right. So that's a great environment to be in. They run the ball a ton, and you can see another chart from Hayden Winks talking about running back fantasy usage by team last year. So this is just in terms of your running back team carries, team red zone opportunities for your running backs, your targets to your running back position. The Colts were way up there despite having Zach Moss for most of the year. So they're going to score a lot of points. They're going to use their running backs. And on top of that, they have one of the best offensive lines in the league. This is from Establish the Run, where the Colts are the 5th best offensive line heading into 2024. This is also a team that was first in neutral pace last year. So they play up-tempo. They run the ball a lot. They were 10th in scoring last year despite having just no Anthony Richardson, no Jonathan Taylor. So this is an offense you want to be a part of. And the beautiful part of it is high tempo, high scoring, but then also run heavy. So it's almost like the 49ers where they're run heavy, they're super efficient, but they don't call a lot of plays. They call a lot of plays. They're really efficient. They score a ton on top of being this run heavy team. So it's like a really weird environment that's amazing for a running back. And the beautiful part about Shane Steichen is he loves to run the ball in the red zone. This is a great tweet from Jacob Gibbs. He said the past 3 Shane Steichen seasons have all resulted in more rushing TDs than passing TDs, even including the Herbert rookie season. Steichen has a 41% red zone pass rate. Only 4 teams posted a rate below that in 2023. So he is running the ball a lot in the red zone. This is going to be an opportunity where Richardson's going to take some goal line opportunities, but there's going to be so many to go around that I'm not all that scared off by Richardson. You also have the idea that Richardson hurt his shoulder scrambling last year. They're not going to want to risk that again. So if they're inside the 5, inside the 10, Jonathan Taylor's really good at punching in goal line carries. Why would you risk injury with your quarterback? Now, that's not to say like Richardson's going to score 7, 8, 9 rushing touchdowns, but there's going to be so many opportunities to go around that I still think that Jonathan Taylor is in play for 10 to 15 touchdowns just because of how Shane Steichen uses the running game in close and how he uses running backs in close. We have a guy who is much less of a talent than Jonathan Taylor that we saw over with the Eagles last time Shane Steichen had a full season of a Jalen Hurts type rushing quarterback. And yes, Jonathan Taylor's overall, his piece of the pie when it comes to rushes inside the 10 is going to be smaller than everybody else, but the pie itself is going to be absolutely massive. Miles Sanders, we saw last year, he is not a good running back. This is him splitting time with Kenneth Gainwell in this 2022 season, I believe. This is him splitting time with like Boston Scott as well. I can't remember if Jordan Howard was in the mix this year too, but even still, Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders were tied for the 3rd most rushes inside of the 10-yard line in that season. Jalen Hurts had 11 touchdowns. Miles Sanders had 8. I would probably flip these, right? We know that Jonathan Taylor is going to be much more efficient on these carries than Anthony Richardson, and we also know that they're not going to want to bang Richardson in goal line, situations with his injury history that we saw last year. So I think we could see another situation where we have 2 quarterback, running back type of like combo in the top 5 for inside the 10-yard line rush attempts in this offense. So I wouldn't be all that scared of Richardson. I just think there's going to be a lot of opportunities overall on the goal line. So I'm not all that concerned about Richardson stealing away goal line carries, and I'm not all that concerned about the lack of receiving upside because, again, he's been the RB1 overall in fantasy without 100 receptions like we see with Christian McCaffrey. Now, moving on to our next player that I think you should forgive, and this one we don't have to spend a lot of time on, it's Patrick Mahomes, right? Patrick Mahomes, it's not super profound to say, hey, draft Patrick Mahomes, but he is QB4, going in the 5th round right now on Underdog, which is an absolute steal. This is kind of a simple take, but if you told, let's say you told your uncle or your work buddy, somebody that doesn't play fantasy football, but they watch football every Sunday, hey, Patrick Mahomes, he's not only not a first-round pick, but he's not the first quarterback off the board. And this is the consensus best player in football. He's not the first quarterback off the board, and he's not a first-round pick in fantasy football. That would blow their minds. Now, I'm not making the case that he should be, right? We all know, like, late-round quarterback strategy was J.J. Zacharyson. We know what rushing can do in terms of Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. But if you're getting the best quarterback in football in the 5th round as the QB4, that's an absolute steal. I think people are just down on him because of what happened last year. If you drafted Mahomes last year, you didn't have a good time. You can see here, 11% advance rate when you draft a quarterback like Mahomes early is going to sting. Now, I will say, too, this is for best ball advance rates, but it's, of course, you can apply it to home leagues, where if you have a low advance rate in best ball, you also suffered in your home leagues because you're starting this guy every week and he's hurting you. And you can see last year was a outlier year for Mahomes, where he was the QB 10 in points per game at 18.4. The previous, 5 years, he was never below 20 points per game, and he was never below like QB 6. This is a guy, I don't have to sell you on Patrick Mahomes, but I almost feel like I do in a way. Where among all active quarterbacks right now, he has the highest points per game over his entire career. He's a good player. Like, it's as simple as that. And I will say as well, he was due for rushing touchdowns last year. You can see he had the most rushing yards he's ever had in a season, but he had 0 rushing touchdowns. So he just had like an all-time unlucky season where his, Kadarius Toney had like 3 drops that resulted in pick sixes. It was just an absolute, it was awful in terms of just his wide receiver play, his goal line luck. The entire offense took a little bit of a step back, but we know Andy Reid is going to cook. Andy Reid always has a good offense. Again, you have 5 years of prior data of Patrick Mahomes absolutely crushing. So I am all in on the discount we're getting on Patrick Mahomes, and now they're investing in the passing game. This is not a team that's going to they're not going to win through Isaiah Pacheco. They have Mahomes. They have Andy Reid, who wants to win in a flashy way, and we bring in Marquise Brown. We have Rashee Rice coming along. Even if he comes in towards the end of the year, we have Rashee Rice coming along. You bring in Marquise Brown. You bring in Xavier Worthy. This is a team, clearly, they didn't draft any running backs. It's just Pacheco and it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire. This is a team that wants to get back to scoring points, throwing the ball. They also had a really, really good defense last year where they allowed just the second fewest yards and the second fewest touchdowns. That's never happened before for a Chiefs defense under Patrick Mahomes. And now they lose L'Jarius Sneed, and there's a lot of variance year to year with defenses. So their defense just take a step back. There should be more shootouts. Mahomes should bounce back when we just look at his career. Again, outside of last year, he's never been below 20 points per game in a given year. So I'm all in on Mahomes. And on top of that, his stacking options are great, where you can get Kelsey, you can get Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, all outside the top 4 rounds. Like, again, I know that this is kind of a smooth brain take, but if you told your buddy who doesn't play fantasy football, you can get Mahomes in the 5th round, not as the first quarterback, and you can also get other Chiefs in the 4th round, but then you tell them, hey, there's actually 2 Jets players in the 1st round of fantasy football drafts right now, it would blow their mind. So Chiefs across the board are undervalued. They're going to score a lot of points this year. It's just a matter of taking Mahomes and then figuring out which 2 of like the 4 pass catchers are going to be great. Now, after that, we have somebody that I think you guys are going to be much more apprehensive towards, and that's Kyle Pitts. Look, I get it. He's going at like the 5-6 turn right now as a tight end 6. If we look back throughout his entire career so far, he is yet to pay off. He has a negative advance rate in every single year of his career. I mean, that's brutal. Every time that we've drafted Kyle Pitts, it has not worked out. Why are we in on Kyle Pitts in 2024? And first, I would say throw out 2023. I know that we keep just throwing out years of Kyle Pitts, but he did come off of an MCL, PCL surgery that we weren't aware of, which is crazy. It's a whole other rant with the Falcons last year. We had the weird Bijan injury. Now we have Kyle Pitts. We didn't know that he had an MCL and PCL surgery. We were just told it was kind of like an MCL cleanup, not this like entire like multi-ligament reconstruction surgery, which is brutal. You could see multiple clips last year where he wasn't himself. He was like slipping. He couldn't plant on this leg. It was awful. But this is like Adam Levitan quoting Kyle Pitts' Instagram post where he says like he played all 17 games post-surgery and pretty much said like that was a tough time for him to produce and look like Kyle Pitts. And on top of that, his quarterback did him no favors last year, man. He was 37th. And remember, this is among all tight ends. So that is 32 other, though the starting tight ends across all of the entire league and then other tight ends too, 37th in catchable target rate. Just 64% of his targets were catchable. That is brutal. So we're talking awful quarterback play. We're talking an Atlanta team that was 27th in pass EPA per play. That's passing efficiency per play. Just 64% of his targets were catchable. And if we just look back over the last 2 years, this is a great stat from, I believe this is from Scott Barrett, but I could be wrong. Like, you can't even see where he is on this list. You can't even see where he is on this list. This is a list of catchable target rate. Catchable target rate for players in the NFL over the last 2 years for wide receivers and tight ends, right? You can see guys with like lower ADOTs, and of course Kelsey's up top when you have somebody like Mahomes. Devontae Smith is up there, Tyreek Hill. That's, a lot of, it's a quarterback stat where Tyreek Hill has Tua, who's pretty accurate, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase with Joe Burrow. But if you scroll, like, he is so far down this list, I have to zoom in for you guys. But out of 73 players on this list in terms of catchable target rate, he is, I can't even get you to where he is. He's all the way at the bottom, 72nd of 73 players. And I will say Marquise Brown, really good steal right now. He didn't make this list because he wasn't awful last year, but you can see he's all the way down below on this list. He's now getting Mahomes. That should be a big difference for him. But Kyle Pitts was in this range where the last 2 years have been brutal. Under 70% of his targets are uncatchable. It's just been awful. It's been awful. Since Matt Ryan left, the quarterback play in Atlanta has been brutal. But we now know that changes, right? We're getting Kirk Cousins. We're getting Michael Penix. So at the very least, Kirk Cousins is an accurate quarterback, but if the Achilles injury is an issue, Michael Penix, even though he's a rookie, he is a capable quarterback. He is not Desmond Ridder, third-round pick, who has just been awful every year of his career. And Deepak Chona here, this is a Sports MD analysis on Twitter, sort of went into the Kyle Pitts injury. And he said, news broke that he actually he underwent surgery on 2 knee ligaments last offseason. Data shows major stat dips up to 30% in year 1. Year 2 projects for return to pre-injury explosiveness, add an obvious QB upgrade, and Pitts might be a low-key steal. So from an injury standpoint, he should be good to go. And now this offense is going to be so much different than it's been. I know people are sick of the Kyle Pitts thing, but when you look at the passing environments that he's been in when it comes to pass attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns, ranks in the entire league. And then you bring in Zach Robinson, right? He is the offensive coordinator that came from the Rams. He is now going to be there in Atlanta. You bring in Kirk Cousins. You bring in Michael Penix. That is going to boost things across the board. And we go from, 2021 was the best passing environments he's been in, and he wasn't even inside of the top 16 in attempts, yards, or touchdowns. In 2022, they were outside of the top 25 in passing touchdowns, yards, and pass attempts. And last year, they were outside the top 20 in all 3 of those stats. And this year, Mike Clay's projections, who he has amazing projections. He takes into account everything between quarterback tendencies, efficiency, coach tendencies, personnel changes. It's all on a PDF he has on his Twitter. It is the best set of projections out there, and he's very conservative as well. He is not trying to be a hot take artist. He is just trying to get everything correct. He has them projected for top 10 in pass attempts, passing yards, and passing touchdowns. Even if these are aggressive and they're inside of the top 15 across the board, that is a massive, massive upgrade from what has been in the past. Not even to mention the efficiency, right? The catchable target rate should go up as well, so that's going to increase your efficiency, but just the overall volume. So now we're getting volume. Now we're getting efficiency, which is all absolutely beautiful for Kyle Pitts, who's an absolute efficiency machine, where when we look at his ADOT, this is a tweet from Mike Clay here, over the past 3 years, Kyle Pitts has 3 of the top 5 highest ADOTs per year. And what ADOT does is for a guy like Kyle Pitts, who's, he's not shifty. He is not Brock Bowers after the catch where he's going to juke people out and look like a running back out there. But what he's going to do is he's going to add that efficiency before the catch where he's already downfield. He's going to have a really high yards per reception. And this is a guy in college where you can pair that yards per reception on the ADOT, and you can pair that with super massive touchdown upside, right? This is like a 6'5", 6'6" tight end who had 12 touchdowns in 8 games his final year at Florida. It's just that the passing offense has been bad his entire career. If we now get passing touchdowns here with Kirk Cousins, we're cooking. And Kyle Pitts, through his first couple years, there's a lot to work with. This is a tweet from @dynasty_IM. Tight ends average 20% or better target share in their first 3 seasons. It's George Kittle. It's Kyle Pitts. He is on all of these crazy names. Something else to also remember is that when you look at all-time leaders for, I'm trying to think of what it was, all-time leaders for receiving yards for a rookie tight end, Kyle Pitts had more receiving yards than a guy like Sam Laporta last year. Now, again, that's not to say that he's better than Sam Laporta. It's just that I think that Kyle Pitts gets a short end of the stick when it comes to these kinds of things. Now, I will say there's another picture that I wanted to show here that is not coming up. Hold on. Yeah, I think that you guys just aren't going to get it, sadly. Or no, here it is. Here it is. I got it. All right, so this is a stat where if you look at Kyle, now I'm not saying that Kyle Pitts is the next George Kittle or the next Kelsey, but it's just a good reminder of how good he is on a per route basis. He had a higher targets per route run than both Kelsey and Kittle through their first 27 games, and his 1.92 yards per route run is right about on par with George Kittle, a little bit behind Kelsey. So on a per route basis, he's efficient, he commands targets, and now he gets the best offensive environment of his career, and he's much healthier than he was last year. So I absolutely love him anywhere in the 6th round this year, and I think especially in your home league, like your redraft leagues with your buddies, he's going to slide even further than that because everyone's just kind of sick of Kyle Pitts, and again, I get it, but that's oftentimes when it's time to cash in and get the guy that nobody wants. You know, you can kind of call it a post-hype sleeper. Now, our next player that definitely fits into that post-hype sleeper analogy is Christian Watson. He burned everybody last year. He had nothing but hamstring strains and knee sprains and shoulders. He just had injuries the entire time. He picks up a hamstring sprain or strain. I know I keep messing up sprain and strain, but he misses 3 games out the gate. 6 more injury reports for the hamstring, then a knee sprain, then shoulder soreness, then a hamstring strain to finish out the season, and it was absolutely brutal. He follows up a wide receiver 8 point per game season, or no, he was wide receiver 8 in points per game from weeks 10 on in his rookie year. He was this absolute hammer down the stretch of his rookie season, and then last year as like a 4th round pick, he flops. And it was largely a lost season due to injury, like we just said. But this is where you put on your tinfoil hat. I will say, first of all, he was a 4th round pick last year. Now you're getting him pick 72, so that's like the 6-7 turn. You know, like the early 7th is where you're getting him this year. So you're getting a discount, right? We're getting the injury discount. He's certainly somebody where I talked earlier, like Jonathan Taylor, you can't really call injury prone. Christian Watson, you certainly can, but there is optimism here where if you take the risk on the discounted price, there is a lot of benefits to be had, and there's some reason to believe that maybe this can get better. This is a story from the offseason. He visited UW, which is University of Washington. They have like a prevention and treatment of hamstring injuries lab, and they said that Watson had a 20% difference in muscle mass between his right and left legs. Now he has between 8 and 10%. So that's a big difference. If one of your legs is like way bigger and it's unbalanced, then the other leg is compensating, and that's when you get the hamstring injury. So they're working to correct that. And Deepak Chona over at Sports MD Analysis pretty much confirms that this is the case. He said reportedly Watson had a 20% difference in side-to-side strength, so that's, leg-to-leg muscle mass. It's now 8 to 10%. Data equals convincing that asymmetry does cause injury. 10% is the key threshold where risk decreases. Modern data suggests his re-injury risk is much lower in 2023, so he seems to be buying it as well. Again, you have to put on your tinfoil hat a little bit to be like, okay, his muscle mass is 20%, now it's on to 8 to 10%. Do we have any verification of these? No. But there's at least some optimism that if this is true, it could be the cure to what his hamstring issues have been over the years. Now, the reason to buy in is because he is a good player when he's been on the field, and I just want players in good offenses, right? We've talked about that with the Colts now. We talked about it with the Chiefs earlier. And this Green Bay offense, ever since Matt LaFleur has gotten this job, has been amazing. Like, I almost think to the point where it's underrated. If we look at even back to his Rams days. Now, you can probably give a lot of the credit to McVay for that 2017 season. Tennessee was a shit show, but when you look through the entire, 7-year span of him coaching, he has had 2 number 1 scoring offenses. He has only been outside of the top 15 in scoring once. This is a high floor, high ceiling offensive mastermind, I guess you could call him. And we look at EPA per play, that's just offensive efficiency. Over his entire tenure with the Packers, he was 7th in 2019, 1st in 2020, 3rd in 2021, 11th in 2022, 5th in 2023. Over that entire span, 2nd in EPA per play. So this is a guy who, no matter what quarterback, no matter if Aaron Rodgers is on a good year or a down year, has been consistently efficient in producing high-scoring offenses. And now he has a quarterback in Jordan Love who's coming off a 30-touchdown season, who for the foreseeable future should be a franchise quarterback. I want pieces attached to Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur, and they're all pretty cheap, right? Jaden Reed is cheap, Dontavion Wicks is cheap, and Christian Watson is also cheap. And I love Christian Watson because, again, that first year was special. He was an absolute monster, yards per out run monster, late season hammer. And over the last 2 years, he has had a lot of touchdowns, but it's not touchdown randomness. He actually leads the NFL over the last 2 years in end zone target share. So that's just, again, your team has a certain amount of targets in the end zone. He has had 50% of them, which is insane. So he's been this red zone target. He's also a big play machine. And we have a sample size from Jacob Gibbs as well, where when Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed were all on the field together for a 159 route sample, including the playoffs, Watson led them in targets. Watson led them in air yards. That's just your ADOT plus your targets, right? So the further your targets are, the more valuable they are. So he had the most air yards, the most targets, and the most receiving yards. Dontavion Wicks only had 56 running them with Watson. They've kind of been, that's probably the biggest downside of Watson, is their roles in this offense between Watson and Wicks was kind of an either-or situation. Now, maybe like Dobbs gets demoted for Wicks or something, but they're probably the most negatively correlated, where if Watson has a good year, Wicks probably has a bad year. If Wicks has a good year, Watson probably has a bad year. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. We'll kind of see what the 3 wide receiver sets look like, whether those are camp reports or whatever, but I'm fine taking gambles on both of those players, Wicks and Watson, just not on the same teams. But remember, he's been the number one, went on the field with the rest of those receivers. He leads the NFL in end zone target share the last couple of years. He was a monster his rookie year. I am buying just because of the role he has on this offense. And I do believe that he wasn't that great on the field last year, one, because of injuries, and two, because Jordan Love came in, and he doesn't have a lot of rapport with Jordan Love. But if he can get rapport with Jordan Love as like this deep threat, explosive play guy, he is kind of the perfect boom-bust, spike week wide receiver 3 that you can either throw in the flex or just benefit from in best ball. Now, our last player here we're going to talk about is, I hate to even say it, it's Najee Harris. It's Najee Harris. This is a guy who I told you guys, I said don't draft him last year. I said don't draft him. Pretty clear dead zone running back, but time is a flat circle, and I actually called this in November of 2022. I said it's going to be fun when Najee Harris becomes a guy I talk myself into in the 9th round of redraft leagues, when he has his Josh Jacobs, Leonard Fournette late career life cycle, becoming an undervalued aging running back with pedigree. And that's where we're at now. Now, he is like an 8th round pick as the RB21 off the board. Again, you see the 11.4% advance rate from last year. That was not good, but I'm in on him this year. He is a guy who commands volume, and when I'm building like 0 RB teams or a hero RB team and I want an RB2, I'm fine with a compiling volume-based running back in the 8th round. He is a very fine running back there. Now, is it like the sexiest pick of all time? No, but you know he's going to get volume. This is a guy, since he's come into the league, gaps the field in touches across all running backs. Also, we know volume is huge. I will say at RyanJ_Heath, we've had him on the channel before. He does amazing work over at Fantasy Points, and he did a study, which is like, it's pretty obvious, right? That volume rules everything at running back, and that's true. We've talked in the past where I believe efficiency kind of uncaps your ceiling, but in terms of floor, that's certainly volume. And we look at volume in terms of correlation to points per game and stickiness. Weighted opportunities per game is the best, where I believe it takes into account carries, it weights targets heavily, and it weights red zone touches heavy as well. It's a stat that Ryan Heath has been using. You can see 0.94 correlation to points per game. That's massive, and it's sticky year to year, which means it's not like, it's not going to change a bunch from year to year. So if you command touches in the past, you're going to command touches in the future, and that's kind of the idea with Najee Harris here, where when we look at last 3 seasons combined, this is again from Ryan Heath, last 3 seasons combined, we look at the weighted opportunities per game. Najee Harris has had 15.2 over the last 3 years, which among the top 25 running backs in ADP, that is 8th among those guys. So he commands volume. He's a bigger back. And I think that Arthur Smith is definitely going to love his archetype. And as much as I don't love Arthur Smith for fantasy, as an offensive coordinator, he has been really good, especially for the running game. Where Najee Harris, this might be finally the year where he adds efficiency to his game. This is expected points per game, so EP per game. That's just your carries, your red zone looks, your receptions. How many points should you be scoring? I don't know why I said scoring, but then you see FPOE per game. That's fantasy points over expected per game. So how much above or below your volume are you scoring? He has, the volume is declining, but I do think that it's kind of hit its floor with that 11.8. And the FPOE per game can go up in an Arthur Smith offense because it suits him much better. First of all, there's going to be a lot more volume here. Maybe not a lot more. Matt Canada would definitely skewed run heavy, but there's going to be volume, there's going to be yards, and there's going to be touchdowns, where in Arthur Smith's 5 years as a play caller, you can see here, he has had 3 years in the top 3 of attempts. He has had 4 years in the top 10, just 1 year outside of the top 10 in the NFL on rushing attempts. all of those years, he's been top 10 in rushing yards in those top 4 years. 2 of those years, he's been second in touchdowns. 3 of those years, he's been top 5 in yards per attempt per game. So this is a guy who schemes a lot of rushing touchdowns, a lot of yards per carry. His rushing efficiency is good as well, where his rush EPA per play, again, just rushing efficiency, 5th in 2019, 2nd in 2020, 2 down years in 2021 and 2023, but a really good year in 2022 when he had like Cordarrelle Patterson and Tyler Algier, where he was just kind of putting together a makeshift running back room and doing really well with it. I do think that those 2 down years of 2021 and 2023, it's just the fact that I think that he's a much better coordinator than he is a coach. We kind of see that a lot in the NFL. I'm trying to sort of think through your biggest examples of that, but I could use the Jets. It's a lot easier with the defensive guys, where I do think that Rex Ryan was a much better defensive coordinator. Same thing with Todd Bowles, right? He's an okay head coach now, but he was much better as like Bruce Arians' right-hand man as a defensive play caller. I'm trying to think as well. There's probably some other offensive guys that probably fit that as well. Like maybe like Josh McDaniels would be one as well, where he's a good play caller, but he's not good as a coach, where you have to like manage all of these things and be the CEO of a team. If you can just let Arthur Smith cook and make a good offense, he will make a good offense. And his running game actually fits really well with Najee Harris, where this is a really cool stat from Fantasy Points data, where Pittsburgh Steelers the last 2 years on zone concept runs, Najee has had a better yards per carry than Jaylen Warren. Warren's been much better at man concept runs. So there's like zone versus and man run schemes. I want to say it's like man gap versus zone. I'm not the biggest X's and O's guys, but those are the 2 different running types in the NFL, or running schemes. The Steelers had, in terms of man concept, 44% in the NFL last year. That was 17th in the NFL. Arthur Smith's Falcons was 31st. So Arthur Smith uses a lot of zone running, which is going to really benefit Najee Harris. So it's going to be a scheme that suits him. It's going to be a rushing offense that has a lot of volume and a lot of efficiency. And then we're also going to get a revamped Steelers offensive line, where they drafted Zach Frazier, they drafted Troy Fautanu, and this offense has gone from one of the league's worst during Najee's tenure to now becoming an up-and-coming offensive line. So I really do like Najee Harris this year. Again, he's not the prettiest but impressive all time. He's not going to be the RB1 in points per game. But if you just need to hit like a single or a double, and your RB2 is thin, or it's like a 0 RB team, you just need easy production at the running back position. This is somebody in your home leagues that'll probably be in the dead zone of like that round 4 or 5 area. But if he slips like he is on Underdog to like that round 7, round 8 area, I am drafting him there all day long. Now, that is going to do it for us today. As always, if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, make sure you check them out. Use promo code RON. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. And I will say as well, I keep tweaking my rankings. If you are drafting on Underdog with us every Monday or just on your own time, and you want my rankings, I right now on the Patreon, patreon.com/Ron Stewart, have a set of uploadable rankings where you can just download it from the Google Sheets, put it right on Underdog, and my rankings are there, sitting there for you. And I've been pretty good about keeping them updated. I want to say I've updated them now like 3 times just in the month of July. So those are fresh. You can kind of get my early targets and fades for fantasy football. I'll have a more like official draft rankings out for, like redraft managed leagues, probably like August 1st. So be on the lookout for that. As always, I do appreciate you guys watching. I'm excited to get back into videos, man. It's July. It's going to be August. You guys know August gets pretty crazy, but appreciate you guys watching. And as always, and I'll see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, ice around my body like I'm